The succession contest is a battle between 14 princes to decide who will become king of the Karkian Empire. However, the true power in this contest are the 8 queens of the empire, each of them using their powers to back their candidate of choice. Now, the queens are first introduced in chapter 349 in silhouette form, each distinguished by a number rather than any personal features, almost as if they're briefcases in a very human game of deal or no deal, with King Nasabi as the contestant opening them all up and leaving a sticky deposit to result in a prince. Now, the queen silhouettes are not in any way to be taken seriously. None of them look like how they're depicted here. Not even 8th Queen Oito, who is introduced 3 pages later in that same chapter. And theoretically, despite these numbers that we see, there is no official ranking among the Karkian queens. At least not in the same way that there's an official ranking between the princes. As stated to us, all of the king's wives operate on equal footing politically, socially, and whatever else-ally. But the reason why I said theoretically is because all of that is complete BS. In the fictional reality that is Hunter x Hunter, the Karkian queens wield more power than any of the princes, and they wield that power in direct correlation to which number queen they are, and their children, the princes, are granted permissions based not so much on their prince birth order, but more based on which mother they just so happen to pop out of. And you can very much tell just how much importance Togashi has placed on the queens, because in the introduction of each and every Karkian prince, their respective mothers are listed in brackets, as if it's the most important piece of information we need to know about them. And as this video goes on, you'll know that that is very true. But look, 8 queens, mate, that's a lot of queens in an arc with 14 princes, a king, tons of mafia dudes, bodyguards for days, so it can be a bit difficult to remember them all. However, I have a handy cheat for that. All you need to do to effectively remember all 8 queens is to speak about 8 different languages, as the names of each Karkian queen contain their ranking in a number in a different language. For example, 1st Queen Unma has un from Francais, 2nd Queen Dwazel contains dua, which is 2 in Indonesian. We'll get back to the 3rd queen in a bit, she's a slight exception. But 4th Queen Catrono contains cuatro, which is 4 in Italish. Then 5th Queen Swinko Swinko is actually spelled cinco in Japanese, which is 5 in Spanish. But we move on to 6th Queen Seiko, which contains se, the number 6 in Italian again. And meanwhile, if you cannot spot the number 7 in 7th Queen Savanti, then English probably isn't your first language. And 8th Queen Oito has oito, and oito is eito in Portuguese. And I did end up skipping 1 queen. That would be 3rd Queen Tang Zhaoli, who to the best of my knowledge skips this trend entirely. That or her reference to the number 3 is so convoluted that I've been unable to figure it out. But look, I'm not a smart person, and perhaps someone smarter than me will figure it out in the comments of this video. But long story less long, as long as you speak English, French, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, and Indonesian, then you will have no issue remembering which queen holds which rank. But to properly dive into the realm of queens, we begin with 1st Queen Unma. And as the 1st Queen, Unma is capable of acting as something of a shadow king. She is the unacknowledged 2nd most powerful person in the Karkian Empire, at least until the next king is selected. As the 1st Queen, Unma has access to essentially whatever or whoever she wants. And when it comes to whoever, she has the most raw manpower of any given queen. And due to being at the tippy top of the Queenamid, Unma has been able to place at least one of her personal agents within the private guards of each prince without fear of retribution to her own children, as no queen of a lower rank has the ability to place their guards within the circle of a higher queen or prince, essentially meaning that 1st Queen Unma has spies and assassins almost literally everywhere aboard the Black Whale 1. She has at the moment the absolute advantage of information within the succession contest, and even though she herself is obviously not a participant, her children are, and Unma can provide her prince of choice with this information or select sprinkles of information to ensure their victory. And also, in extreme cases, it is possible for Unma to order her representatives to assassinate a prince. And Unma happens to be the mother of the primary antagonistic princes within the contest, being 1st Prince Benjamin and 4th Prince Rydnik. And in regards to Benjamin, one thing that makes Unma extra terrifying is that she has full authority to control Benjamin's private army as she sees fit. Unma can also issue an order to the guard or subordinate of any prince, and they would have to carry that out because it is the 1st queen demanding it. Again, showing that the queens wield much more power than their respective princes. And given the personalities of Benjamin and Rydnik, it should come as no surprise that Unma is the most ambitious of all of the 8 queens. And it should be noted that Unma right now is possibly caring for Benjamin's child, which would be Unma's grandchild. As in chapter 403, we see First Queen Unma's quarters, and in the background, you can see a maid next to what looks like a crib. And this is extremely relevant because at the moment, it appears that First Prince Benjamin's plan is to make a sacrificial gambit to win the contest. Benjamin's plan is to briefly claim the throne and to pass it on to his child upon his inevitable and swift death. So this alleged babby in Unma's room is extremely important because this child serves as Unma's backup plan to stay in power should Benjamin's gambit succeed. And I say backup because the rather scandalous thing about First Queen Unma is that she isn't actively supporting either Benjamin or Sir Rydnik, at least not to the best of our knowledge, and instead Unma is putting her power behind 9th Prince Hulkenberg, who is her secret child. And because this is Hunter x Hunter, things are about to get a little bit complicated, but just bear with me. Hulkenberg is publicly known as the child of Second Queen Dwalsel, who we'll investigate in a bit, and Hulkenberg's status and privileges reflect those of his public mother. However, it is currently hypothesized that Unma gave Hulkenberg to Dwalsel to raise out of fear that he would be assassinated for being associated with the First Queen and the privileges of the First Queen. It's speculated that the assassins would have been one of his brothers, Benjamin or Sir Rydnik. They both have a rather vicious rivalry with one another, and Hulkenberg is quite a fair bit younger than them. So Hulkenberg's presence would be very threatening to their status as they now need to share the First Queen with yet another brother. And so a very young Hulkenberg probably would have had a very nasty accident were he not given to a lower ranked queen to raise and taken off the threat radar of his two older brothers. However, as stated earlier, Unma appears to be throwing her power and influence behind Hulkenberg, which may mean that Unma is a much kinder person than we've been led to believe, as Hulkenberg is viewed as the hope of the Karkian Empire and someone who wants to end the corruption of the monarchy and switch the nation to a delicious democracy. Either that or Unma may be supporting all three of her children equally, but to date, the only one that she has shown a preference for is Hulkenberg. And Hulkenberg himself is in a rather awkward position with his public family, as he is said to be the son of Second Queen Dwalsel, who also happens to be the mother of Second Prince Camilla, 5th Prince Debeppa, and 7th Prince Lucerus. And in terms of personality, Dwalsel is very much at the other end of the spectrum to Unma in every way, because despite her extremely high ranking, Dwalsel seems to have no desire to exercise her influence at all. She's been painted as a very soft-hearted individual who has devoted every staff member under her command to supportive roles rather than active roles, like the assassins that most of the other queens employ. And interestingly, her adopted son, Benjamin, claimed past tense to have been a pacifist, and this could be as a result of his adoptive mother's influence, as Dwalsel does appear to be a legitimate pacifist, or at least much more so than Benjamin turned out to be. And Dwalsel has stated that her intent is not to get involved in the succession contest at all, and that it's up to her children to fight for and decide who gets to become the next king. Much to the disgust of her eldest child, Second Prince Camilla, who has a rather fascinating dynamic with her mother, as after hearing Dwalsel's pacifist intent, Camilla ordered her mother to assist her in getting rid of Benjamin and then Hulkenberg in that order. And that's very interesting because it goes against everything I've said about the queens to this point. In theory, Second Queen Dwalsel cannot be ordered by Second Queen Camilla, because Dwalsel is a queen and she has supreme authority over her spawn as well as the lower ranking queens and spawn. However, Dwalsel's meek and pacifist personality is something that Camilla has been actively manipulating, with Camilla herself essentially usurping the authority of a Karkian queen, making her exceptionally dangerous. However, despite this dynamic, it's currently unknown as to whether or not Dwalsel will actually follow Camilla's directive or remain committed to her pacifism, or take another option entirely. Dwalsel, as presented to us, seems to be one of the more moral queens. We're going to be checking out some pretty messed up ones shortly, but Dwalsel may end up landing on the decision that it would be best to maybe remove Camilla from the pool of candidates for the betterment of the empire. However, third queen Tang Zhaoli is by far the most mysterious of the Karkian queens, and in fact at the time of this recording she has yet to make a physical appearance in the series. All we have is this one image that Togashi drew of her face, but if she's anything like her only child, third Prince Zhang Lei, then she's probably quite an amiable and diplomatically geared persona, but with a definite dark side, just like Zhang Lei. As the one thing we do know about third queen Tang Zhaoli is a pretty major twist, which is that she did not actually bear the child of King Nasabi. Third Prince Zhang Lei is allegedly the biological son of Onyo Longbao. I say allegedly, it's been alleged by Zhang Lei himself, so I find it quite credible, and Onyo Longbao is one of Nasabi's illegitimate half-brothers who serves as the head of the Jiyu mafia family. And scandalous as this may sound to us, it's possible that this is a well-known fact within within the Karkin Empire, because their law specifically states that children born of the wives of the king are considered legitimate princes. There is no mention whatsoever of the children needing to possess the paternal lineage of the king. So even if this was some sort of secret and Zhang Lei's true father was revealed to the world, legally and practically, it means nothing. Also, Zhang Lei isn't the only prince who lacks this paternal lineage, as Beyond Netero also has a secret child among the Karkin princes who we're currently unaware of, but we will discuss that at a later date. But for now, what it means for the sake of this discussion is that Tang Xiaoli has her own motives, and the Zhiyu family has become more of a literal family, with Zhang Lei being the benefactor of his father, lover of his mother. To fourth queen Catrono now, she's also not made a physical appearance in the series as of yet. However, we know a lot more about her than Tang Xiaoli, primarily in regards to how Catrono feels about her only child, Sixth Prince Tyson, for a wide range of reasons. Despite the fact that Tyson seems to be a genuinely kind person, she is neither conventionally attractive nor is she a conventional royal in terms of behavior, both factors of which have contributed to Catrono having stated that she does not expect grandchildren. So it's implied that Catrono has more or less given up on her chances with the succession contest, because Tyson is her only child and Catrono has no expectations of her. And this disappointment is at a level where it's said that most other queens actively pity Catrono, even the ones that rank lower than her. However, I find it very hard to believe that Sixth Prince Tyson is considered an embarrassment for Catrono, at least compared to 5th Queen Swinko Swinko's only child being 8th Prince Saleh Saleh. Swinko Swinko is arguably, and I'm going to make that argument, the greatest failure in the role of the queen, as a queen's duty is to prepare their children for the succession contest. That is primarily what they exist for. And Saleh Saleh was so unprepared that he couldn't even outlast his literal baby sibling. However, to Swinko Swinko's credit, she is actually directly responsible for the death of 12th Prince Momose, as it was one of her assassins named Tufty who carried out the murder, and Swinko Swinko herself is extremely capable. Too capable to the point where Saleh Saleh has never had to do a single thing for himself. And Saleh Saleh's guardian spirit beast was quite literally created as a manifestation of his reliance on his mother for everything. But because Swinko Swinko did fail in her primary duty, she now has the dishonor of being the only queen who has been completely eliminated from the succession contest. Every other queen has at least one child remaining who could become king, but not her. And several queens with multiple children do have preferences for who that one child should be, such as 6th Queen Seiko, mother of twins, 10th Prince Kacho, and 11th Prince Fugetsu. Seiko is a highly skeptical and quite paranoid queen, which is probably actually healthy behavior when you're part of this royal family, and especially when you're relatively low in the hierarchy of this family. And Seiko shows a clear preference for her daughter Fugetsu. In chapter 400, it's even revealed that Seiko despised Kacho's quote, know-it-all attitude, and that her plan was to have Kacho serve as a sacrificial shield for Fugetsu to win the contest, which is rather tragic considering that Kacho and Fugetsu viewed each other as two halves of a whole. But furthermore, Seiko also sees Fugetsu as a tool as well. Seiko knows that she can have Fugetsu carry out whatever she desires. However, Seiko fears that Fugetsu alone is not strong enough to survive the contest, which at the moment is proving to be potentially true. And it's very hard to tell if Seiko actually cares for either of her daughters, or if they're just necessary pieces of her own personal plans. What I will say is that Seiko did tear up when Kacho claimed that she would fight with dignity and pride for the sake of Kakin. However, Kacho, after leaving the room, went on to claim that those tears were an empty gesture to assuage the guilt of being willing to sacrifice her own child. But Seiko is hugely ambitious considering her status as 6th queen. She falls into a very awkward space where she's been part of this family long enough to not be naive about the future, but neither she nor her children have had the time to gather the knowledge, skills, and resources that they need to survive this event. Which only gets worse as we examine 7th Queen Savanti, mother of 12th Prince Momose and 13th Prince Mariam. And Savanti, similar to Seiko, is a rather pragmatic queen with a very clear favorite child. From the very beginning of the contest, Savanti dedicated as many resources as possible to her son Mariam, even ordering guards that were assigned to her daughter Momose to leave their post to join Mariam's team because it was more important that he was protected. However, unlike Seiko, Savanti actually seems to feel quite a bit of guilt when Momose was murdered, almost certainly blaming herself for taking Momose's guards away. However, it's hard to argue that the most empathetic and caring queen is not 8th Queen Oito, who currently employs Kurapika as a body to her daughter 14th Prince Werble. And Oito is the queen who we've spent by far the most time with, and her only desire is to ensure that her daughter survives this contest. Oito has no ambition beyond the well-being of Wobble. She doesn't even want Wobble to become king. And as a queen, Oito is all but dismissed by the royal family due to her lowly status as number 8. It doesn't get any lower than that. However, Oito also happens to be wildly intelligent, capable of deceiving even Kurapika, as well as being very quick to dissect Kurapika's true motivations in any given situation. Kurapika can hide very little from her, and as the contest goes on, Oito only continues to become more and more capable. And in fact, she is currently the only queen we know of capable of using Nen. So Oito may lack the political and social influence of the 7 superior queens, but I would personally not underestimate Oito and her sheer drive to ensure that Wobble survives, whilst most other queens are willing to sacrifice their children a bit too readily, because that drive is what has the potential to turn Oito into an extremely dangerous opponent in this succession contest.